To Savvy Zaps podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest today is Scott Ritter. He is a former UN weapons inspector. You've seen him here before. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Scott. So there's a lot of information that is coming from the Middle East. And I think that, I don't know how to say it, but I think that some things are getting blurred. And now we're at a point where we don't know if we could believe what's true or if it's not true. And I want to start with what just happened. So there was that video that was published, and corporate media outlets covered this all within 24 hours, that Iran put a bounty, a 10 million bounty on Barron Trump's head, right? Now, Iran has not taken credit for this. And then today I have seen that Israel's Channel 14, they deleted the video. And people are saying that it is now fake news. Now, the claim was that this video was aired on the IRGC's station, on their news station. And in that video, we can't play it on YouTube for people wondering, but in that video, I noticed they even had the logo of that television station on the video. So I want to get your take about this. What is real? What isn't real? Do you think this bounty that was put out there, this news that they put this bounty on Barron Trump is real, especially now that this video is deleted? Or do you think that there's something more nefarious at work here?
I don't believe the Iranians put a bounty on anybody. That's not how they operate. In the United States, the Trump administration and its supporters, and indeed, as you talked about in the corporate media, but also in the social media circles, there's just a tremendous amount of Islamophobia, people who just have an irrational hatred of the Islamic faith and those who practice it, and especially a nation like Iran that has defined itself in theocratic terms. They are an Islamic republic. We don't like that, we being the people who promote Islamophobia. Not me, not you, but collectively, the United States and the West. And so that means that we have a target audience here that is susceptible to anything that paints Iran in a bad light. And we've just seen this, over and over and over again, just the lies. Iran slaughtered 30, 40, 50,000 people in the streets during the protests. Straight up lie. 3,400. The majority of them were armed militants who were trying to hack to death and burn to death Iranian policemen, and who fired indiscriminately into crowds of peaceful protesters to up the numbers. We know what the truth is, we being those who pursue fact-based, evidence-based information. But all it takes is, ostensibly credible faces, your CBS Evening News announcer, or NBC or ABC, or, you can have, Piers Morgan come on and say this kind of nonsense and things of this nature. And then, of course, it's echoed in the social media realm by people like Laura Loomer, Sarah Adams, and just well-known Islamophobes who have very large audiences. And so it gets echoed around. Straight up lie. That's not how Iran operates. Just for your audience edification, Iran is a civilized nation, highly cultured nation. Its population is extremely well-educated. They have more engineering degrees per capita than the United States. They have more PhDs per capita than the United States. They outthink us in every way, shape, and form, which is why they won the last war. They're just better at thinking than we are. And their politicians are reflective of this reality. So for Iran to go down the crude path of putting out a bounty on the head of Barron Trump, it's just absurd in the extreme. It's a straight up lie. Now, you bring up some interesting points. It looked real. Welcome to the world of disinformation. Look, the CIA has been involved. If you remember, and they can be very sophisticated at this. Go back into the 1960s. There was a magazine called Encounter, and it was a literary magazine. I mean, it had some big names on there, some poets and some writers and some intellectuals, all writing this stuff. And the whole idea of Encounter was to create a battlefield for ideological arm wrestling, not war, but hey, here's a chance to air some stuff and promote some ideas and stuff. And it was sort of left leaning. The idea was, of course, it was paid for by the CIA. And this was a giant psychological operation run against the progressive left by the CIA, which has been doing this for decades. And so has MI6, so has the Mossad. And now it's become even more sophisticated. Just so people know, we have airplanes. We call them, I guess they're HC-130s. But these are, and we have other aircraft too, but they during wartime, they'll do things like they'll fly around and they'll hack into broadcasts and they'll put in videos and play them on TV. And the videos will have watermarks to make it look like they're the thing. And there'll be people speaking. And now that we have AI, you can actually get somebody who looks like somebody to say something that nobody said. And the Israelis are very good at this. They're very good at hacking into and injecting things. But the CIA is. I mean, we used to do it old school, where the CIA would co-op, like let's call it CNN, just to throw one out there. Let's say the CIA wanted to put out a propaganda piece that put the weapons inspectors in a good light, put the Iraqi government in a bad light. Maybe the CIA would coordinate with CNN and the weapons inspectors to produce this and have it broadcast as part of CNN's broadcast. Now, it's a CIA operation approved by the highest, but it looks like a CNN thing. That's old school. Today, we don't have to go through that lengthy process. Today, they can just simply manufacture on a computer a broadcast that says the most ridiculous things and inject it in so that it's played and somebody can say, I recorded this off of the official Iranian channel, which appears to be what happened here.
This is very dangerous.
Yeah. Welcome to the real world.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was telling people yesterday, I said, well, if they did do this, I mean, who are we to yell at Iran after the U.S. government killed, Ayatollah's father? Right,
but it's not about yelling. I mean, not because it's two separate things. There's no debate that we murdered Ali Khamenei. No debate that we killed him. We admit it. President Trump bragged about it. The fact is, there's a story now coming out that Trump was at Mar-a-Lago having dinner when the people came in to announce that Ali Khamenei was killed. And Trump said, tell everybody. And so they announced that the United States participated in the murder of the religious leader of a major branch of Islam. And while they were announcing it, Trump sat there with his chest out like he's some sort of master king of the world. I mean, this is where we stand. But that's just us being irresponsibly stupid as a nation, as a collective. And I say us with all due respect, Sabby, not you, not me, but maybe not your audience, but the American people. We tolerate this crap. Excuse my language, but we tolerate it. We put this man in office. I voted for him. I'm guilty of that. But you know what? When you vote for somebody, you get to hold them accountable, doubly so, for what they do in your name. And so I do hold him accountable, calling him out for the orange-faced, obese buffoon that he is today. But why do we tolerate this man's continued existence? Why do we pretend that what he does is normal? Nothing he does is normal. But that's one step. What we have going on elsewhere, though, is disinformation. And the disinformation right now that's being used to promote the notion of Iranian savagery. How dare they go after Barron Trump? Come on, Sabby. Remember when we accused the Russians of a bounty on American soldiers in Afghanistan that turned out to be a 100% lie? We have a similar thing taking place today where they're talking about the Iranians putting a bounty on American service members. And I forget what they said, $30,000, but they'll double it to 60 if an Iranian woman kills an American serviceman. The Iranians don't operate this way, ladies and gentlemen. That's not how the Iranian nation operates. But Scott, they hang people by the neck until dead. Yeah, Mossad agents who murdered people, burned people. I'm not a proponent of the death penalty because mistakes are made, but come on, guys, we're Americans. Look at our prison system. Look at the people we put away, innocent people we lock away. Remember the Rockefeller laws about marijuana possession by black men and how we just stuffed prisons with black men who did nothing more than smoke a joint while we kept all the cocaine sniffing college white boys in college untouched? I remember that. So please, the hypocrisy has to end. But it's not just the hypocrisy. We have to understand that what we can do to the Iranians and what we are doing to the Iranians can be done here at home. AI can create anything, and they can create. Look, Jimmy Dore famously talked about his computer being hacked by an Israeli-based program. And he said, they got all of my stuff. They got all my private photos. They got everything. He said, he's not worried about what he did. He knows what he did. He knows he didn't break any laws. What he's worried about, though, is with these images, what AI can do. And you can now generate, things and put it out there to destroy people's reputations. And if you don't think that the U.S. government would do that, if you don't think a state government, you don't think state police, if you don't think any police department is capable of this, you haven't been living in the United States lately. When you have Baltimore police willing to plant guns and drugs on innocent victims to up things, understand that now that they have these tools of AI, they'll be willing to do it. And are the courts going to show the scrutiny? We have judges who, I know this for a fact, I lived through this, judges who will work with the prosecutors to put anybody in jail, even if they didn't commit a crime, because they want to up it, they want to hype it, they want to do this. 3.5 years. No crime committed, but the judge and the prosecutor did their thing, baby, because that's how America works. You have no recourse to the law. And now we have AI jumping in. And this is a very scary thing. I'm glad that this has been exposed by the Israelis. But now we have a duty and responsibility not to treat this as a one-off and to recognize that this may be becoming the norm and that we have a duty and responsibility as consumers of information and as citizens who empower ourselves with information to be responsible about double checking, doing our due diligence about the information we consume, especially when it seems to be too good to be true.
Yeah, those are all good points. And you bring up intelligence, and that brings me to this, which was just announced as well. Shout out to Ryan Rosbiani here. Iran warns BBC Iran International could be military targets. So everyone listen to this. Major General Abafazi accused the BBC, Iran International, and Radio Farda of working directly with Mossad, the CIA, and other hostile intelligence services. He warned their employees could be treated as enemy personnel and placed on Iran's list of potential military targets. So we have very nefarious things happening here. And I've called out the BBC before on this show. But Iran has basically, realized that these outlets here, and especially the BBC, are working with intelligence, working with Mossad.
Yeah, not just working with Mossad. I mean, it's BBC, so it means they're working for MI6, who collaborates with Mossad. And they also work with the CIA. The CIA has its own, radio free, I forget what they call it now. It's not Radio Free Europe. They have that. But, the United States, through the Radio Liberty and the and other broadcasts, we project Farsi language things paid for by the CIA, or because in the United States we made soft power, what used to be CIA soft power, we put it under the National Endowment for Democracy, and it's run by the United States Agency for International Development. And so, but anytime you see a British or American affiliated foreign language broadcasting service, it's 100% intelligence run. I'll just say that one more time. It's 100% intelligence run. If you guys want to do a test on it, go and look at the people who work for these things over time and then see where they gravitate to. They all have intelligence relationships. They all are spooks. And what they're doing is information warfare. And it's become even more nefarious now because it's mental warfare. Information warfare is, propaganda out there designed to confuse a population. Mental warfare is designed to destroy a nation from within by projecting in disinformation and thought process, planting seeds that will then germinate, become doubtful, and create disruption in the society. We saw this weaponized. I mean, again, people would be like, well, why would the Iranians get irritated? Well, we saw the British and Mossad and the CIA use information broadcast in to send people into the streets, protests at the end of 2025, early 2026. And then Mossad used its agents to infiltrate these protests in an effort to create violence. This is where 3,400 people were killed. Nearly 4,000 people were killed. This was CIA, Mossad, British generated violence using these broadcasts to direct these activities. So these aren't innocent journalists. These are journalists who've been co-opted by foreign intelligence. And just so people understand, do you remember? It was funny. I saw this movie, On the Brink. Jeff Daniels playing Ronald Reagan. Now, yeah, the reason why I like it is my time. I mean, that was my thing. Arms control, Reykjavik, INF Treaty, the whole thing. I lived it. And so I watched it, and I just realized it's 110% Hollywood-driven propaganda nonsense. But there was an interesting exchange where, Jeff Daniels playing Reagan said, you arrested our journalists, and then Gorbachev pounded the table, but I released him, even though we knew he was a spy. And Reagan, lifts an eyebrow. Well, guy's name is Danilov. He was a spy. He worked for the CIA. He was taking tasking from the CIA. The Russians had him dead to rights. He was a straight up spook. And then that led to hearings afterwards because, my God, how could this? All the American journalists were like, oh, you can't use journalists as spies because then nobody will ever trust us. They'll treat us like we're spies. Well, you are. But then there was a hearing in the Senate, and the CIA came straight out and admitted, yeah, we will use journalists as deep cover spies. Remember that guy from the Wall Street Journal that got arrested in Russia a little while back trying to buy state secrets at Ekaterinburg about the Russian missile production, and the U.S. was pretending he was a journalist? He wasn't. He was a spook, straight up CIA spook. This is what they do. The CIA buys journalists and intelligence service buy journalists, and then they weaponize them. Now, if you get caught as a journalist, you're a spy. You could be executed. They don't do that anymore, but you could be executed. But what Iran is saying is these outlets that you use to broadcast disinformation, to wage mental warfare against the Iranian people are military targets, and we're going to take them out straight up. And they have every right to do this. I know there's going to be outrage in the West. Oh, you're targeting journalists. These are not journalists. These are spies taking direction from their intelligence service masters. People need to understand that. If you have a foreign broadcast service broadcasting into Russia from outside of Russia in the Russian language, it is 100% certain that they are working on behalf of a foreign intelligence service. And if you have a foreign broadcasting service broadcasting in Farsi from outside of Iran into Iran, 100% certain that they are working on behalf of a foreign intelligence service. So please don't get up in arms about this. I don't want to hear any journalists going, oh my God, they're Look, you want to talk about targeting? I'm targeted by the U.S. government that's paid the Ukrainian services to put me on a death list and then try to assassinate me. That's called targeting a journalist. All right. But having the Iranians say, we're going to take out intelligence operations that are disguised as journalist outlets, that's not targeting journalists. That's just taking care of spies.
Yeah, one of the things I've pointed out to people is that even, like Wolf Blitzer, for example, he's another one of them that is compromised and 100% Zionist. Like a lot of these people, and you would never know it. Like if you're just sitting at home, just watching them on TV, you're like, this is just their job. But a lot of these people are compromised and have been compromised for a long time.
So let me tell you a little war story, just because this pertains. I resigned from the United Nations in August of 1998, and I was recruited almost immediately by NBC to be an on-air analyst. And I got some good airtime. I was on live with Tom Brokaw, got invited to Tom Brokaw's Christmas party. And I was, I did the whole thing. I was there. And it was pretty cool. But what I found out is as I went from interview to interview to interview, I always ran into, you have film crews that follow you, the film and sound people, and then they have a producer with them. And the producer is the one who arranges the whole shoot. About 90% of the time, when the shoot finished, the producer would come up to me and hand me their business card. Now, this is normal. Because they want to maintain contact. Hey, if we ever have something, could we reach out to you if we have something that we want to talk about? Absolutely. But the NBC producers didn't hand me NBC business cards. They handed me APAC cards. 90% of the NBC producers worked for APAC and were open about it. They handed me APAC business cards. This is NBC. Now, I can't say that CBS and ABC are the same, but I can say that CBS and ABC are the same. MSNBC, totally infiltrated by APAC. You say Zionist-affiliated journalists. They're all Zionist-affiliated journalists, Sabby, in mainstream media. You do not get to receive the paycheck they receive unless you have agreed to promote the Zionist messaging. And they are in your face about it. And it's one of those things that people, because I'll say this because it's the truth, but people here go, oh, you're just anti-Semitic. Nope. I'm just telling you what the facts are. And if you don't believe that the Jewish lobby controls corporate media today, then you are deaf, dumb, and blind.
That is wild that they are handing out cards.
I have them right here in my drawer. I have the cards. I kept them. It's crazy, but it's true.
Let me get your take on what's happening now. There have been reports that Donald Trump behind the scenes has been asking for a way out. This is what sources have said abroad, a way out of this Iran war. And now we're starting to see, again, like the U.S. hasn't struck Iran in about a couple of weeks. What happens next here, do you think? Because again, Trump has to know that they can't beat Iran. And now you're hearing about these economic sanctions, this D-Day that was announced by the Trump administration. Where does this go from here? And how does the U.S. get out of this without making it obvious to the American people that believe this BS story that Iran is losing? How do they get out of that without making that obvious that the U.S. can't beat Iran?
How do you pull a rabbit out of a magic hat? I mean, I don't know. It's a trick. It's sleight of hand. It's deception. But that's what has to take place here. You brought up Scott Bessent and the most embarrassing press conference in the history of embarrassing press conferences, because, I mean, I have to be careful what I say. I don't like Scott Bessent, and therefore I'm oftentimes guilty of saying things that have no relationship to his professional duties. So I will behave myself. But what a lonely, pathetic figure he cut standing there at the podium, pretending that he was some sort of modern day incarnation of Dwight D. Eisenhower ordering the D-Day invasion. Because at the end of the day, Dwight D. Eisenhower led a coalition of people who had been training with the United States for that mission for a long time. And when we went across the beaches at Omaha and Utah Beach, there were Canadians going across the beach at Juno Beach, and there were British going across at Gold. Free French forces were joining them. We had people invading Nazi-occupied France together with us. We had an alliance of people who agreed on goals and objectives. This pathetic figure was standing there announcing D-Day, admitting that we haven't coordinated with anybody, that we're just announcing this, and now we're going to go out and get everybody to join up with us. Really? Is that how you announce an invasion? By saying, here's what we're going to do, and now we'll go find allies. And then threatening the allies, if you don't join us, we will invade you economically, secondary sanctions, and targeting Iran. Just the pathetic nature of this. Understand that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is going to have a major summit in Kyrgyzstan, I believe at the end of August, early September. All the major economic powers in the world, minus the United States and what's left of the European Union and Canada, will be there, including Iran, the nation that we're trying to isolate. Iran will be at the SCO meeting, which is a major economic gathering. Russia, China, India, the whole world will be there. Iran will be there. Do you understand how pathetic Scott Bessent is? But that gets even better, because I think on September 12th and 13th in Beijing, the BRICS summit's going to be there. And Iran's going to be sitting there as well at BRICS, not just with Russia, China, India, and the rest of but with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. The two nations that are ostensibly our regional allies will be sitting there talking about economic activities. Iran is not isolated. Iran will never be isolated. Scott Bessent stood there like an idiot. But here's the thing, because this comes into answering your question. It turns out that actually we haven't done anything. He made this big announcement of an invasion that will never take place. When asked specifically what sanctions have been imposed on Iran, he said, we haven't imposed any yet. We're simply warning them. And which secondary sanctions will be that? Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Why? Well, that would collapse the global economy. No, Sherlock. So what he's done is he's created the atmosphere of America putting the ultimatum down. You don't do what we demand you to do, we will tear you apart. We will destroy you. We are the conquerors of the world. And yet nothing was actually threatened because nothing was done. Um, Now what we see is frantic activity behind the scenes as the United States tries to come up with some sort of compromise deal about the Strait of Hormuz. You see, Trump needs to be able to say shipping is flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. He can't make it happen militarily. He's already tried that with his lies. 400%, 400% up. Well, when you go from 0 to 4 ships, when the normal routing is like 60, you say 400%, you understand how meaningless that number is. And we don't have the military capacity to make it better. We can't. We have no capacity. That's what happens when you lose a war. So now we need to find another way. So he's threatened an economic D-Day for anybody who does business with Iran. And then he's praying that before it becomes evident that Scott Bessent was just blowing hot air, that some sort of deal can be arranged where the Strait of Hormuz is opened up so that he, Donald Trump, can turn to the American people and pull the white rabbit out of the hat and say, because Scott Bessent declared D-Day against the world, we got the result we wanted. America's great. I'm Donald Trump. I'm the most awesome thing since sliced bread. I think that's what's happening here because Bessent's speech was just a giant nothing burger. There was nothing to it. And there can be nothing to it because Iran will never be isolated. The only person being isolated is Scott Bessent in the United States. People need to understand this. If we implemented what Scott Bessent talked about, it would destroy the American economy overnight.
Yep.
And I don't like this because I'm finally in a situation where I can paint my house. I can talk to my wife about a vacation for the first time in 20 years. And now they're going to tell me that the dollars that I have are going to become worthless because Scott Bessent is talking about global de-dollarization. That's what he's talking about. If you don't cooperate with us, we will disconnect you from the dollar. Remember, Vladimir Putin famously said, it's not Russia that's pushed away the dollar. It's the dollar that pushed away Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Russia didn't want to de-dollarize. Nobody in the world wanted to de-dollarize. The dollar is a convenient currency. And the world would be more than happy to allow the dollar to continue to be the global reserve currency as long as the United States behaved responsibly. People need, again, I'm not an economist. I know you've spoken to many people who are so much smarter than I am on economics, but I do know this, that with the dollar out there, with the petrodollar, we've got, guys, there's a lot of dollars out there, like trillions of dollars out there in the world today, trillions of dollars. And you know what it allows us to do? Let's say you have $100 trillion. I'm making that number up right now, but out there. And we decide we need to print $1 trillion here at home. Do you understand that it's like a blip? The global impact of us printing $1 trillion is a blip. It's like, a penny or a dollar. You got $100 bill and a dollar floats away. You go, well, I got 99 still. I'm doing all right. So we got 100 trillion out there and we go, we need to print another $1 trillion. It gets absorbed into this massive thing. If the world de-dollarizes, that 100 trillion shrinks to whatever our, GDP is. And now let's say we have, I don't know, what is our GDP? A couple trillion a year? 4, 5, 6 trillion? I don't know. But if you're suddenly printing $1 trillion with single digit, GDP as your foundation, that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. That creates massive inflation that destroys the economy. Scott Bessent just threatened the world with de-dollarization. And as I said, the world is gathering. The world that matters is gathering in Kyrgyzstan and in Beijing later this month and next month, where they're going to be talking about alternatives to the dollar. If you're an American right now, panic.
Yep.
And then we come back to what we talked about earlier. What are you going to do to hold these people to account? Scott Bessent just stood up there and said straight up, I'm going to destroy the American economy. It used to be that we would ask the politicians, when they were running, we'd say, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Remember that question? It was always asked, are you better off today than? They stopped asking that question because the answer is always no. It's always no. We've never had a politician in modern times who could say, I made America better for you during my term. America just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And now you have Scott Bessent saying, I'm going to destroy the whole thing. And Americans are like, all right, yeah, sure. I'll go order some more McDonald's and hope I can save enough money to buy an Xbox for Christmas.
I will say the sad part about it is that some people were cheering it on, not realizing what they're applauding. Like I thought that was hilarious to me. I'm like, why are you cheering that on? That's going to impact us. And for people to even believe that China or Russia would go along with something like that, that just goes to show you just how I think naive people can be. I'm like, you really think that China and Russia are going to listen to the US and say, we're not going to do business with Iran again? Like, no, that's not how the world works. Like, we're a part of the West, but the West is very small when you compare us to the rest of the world.
Yeah,
And you're right. Yeah, Iran is not isolated. They don't stand alone, despite what Donald Trump and others will want you to believe. That's actually not true. It's
And
like,
if you want to know the timeline of Bessent's lunacy, Xi Jinping comes to visit Donald Trump, I think, on September 24th, state visit, White House. I can promise you that this will not be an issue on that table, meaning that whatever nonsense is going on right now needs to be resolved before then, because Xi Jinping isn't going to sit there. It's like, I know this is something we wanted to talk about and we'll get to it, but Radcliffe, some of the things where, CIA Director Mike Radcliffe has flown to Moscow to give an ultimatum to President Putin. And I'm like, well, no, that didn't happen. That could never happen and will never happen. A CIA director flying to Moscow, going into the Kremlin and giving an ultimatum to a sitting Russian president named Vladimir Putin. That's the kind of cannabis-infused wet dream nonsense that fat people living in their mother's basements come up with. It's an impossibility. Just like it's an impossibility for Xi Jinping, probably the top world leader today. God, come on, Donald Trump is not a top world leader. He's a top world joke. And Vladimir Putin, as much as I respect the man, the Chinese economy dwarfs the Russian economy, and the Chinese global presence is there. So I put Xi Jinping above Vladimir Putin in terms of global, impact. So here's Xi Jinping, and you expect he's going to float into Washington, D.C., and allow himself to be lectured to by Donald Trump. Remember Donald Trump, the defeated, fat, orange-faced buffoon, and how he behaved in Beijing when he had a chance to be a man. Man up, Donnie, baby. You got Xi Jinping right there in Beijing. Look him in the face, and tell him that the Chinese are a worthless race dominated by white American men like me, and I'm going to rule you. No, he was sitting there begging, pleading for something. Throw me something, anything. And Xi Jinping gave him nothing, sent him away empty-handed. So you think that relationship suddenly going to transform into one where Donald Trump can call Xi Jinping in to the White House and start dictating to him, threatening him. Ain't never going to happen. And if China gets a whiff, if that's what the president wants, the meeting will never happen. So Trump needs this meeting. So Scott Bessent's blustering bull, I'll watch my language. I promised myself to watch my language, so I'm doing my best. But whatever Scott Bessent was doing up there, this will blow over. It has to blow over before September 24th, because mark my words, Xi Jinping will never enter a White House thinking that Donald Trump thinks he can lecture Xi Jinping. It just isn't going to happen. The king doesn't enter the residence of a prince to be lectured by the prince. And sadly, ladies and gentlemen, the United States ain't the king of anything anymore. Donald Trump is the prince of what's left of America. That's it. Xi Jinping is the king of the world.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's hilarious to me that people would believe that China would bend to the U.S. like that. We need them more than they need us. So it's hilarious. But speaking of Ratcliffe, that's what I wanted to get into as well, because this was reported. Russian officials have briefed Iran that the CIA director Ratcliffe's Moscow visit delivered a message with the U.S. asking Moscow to press Iran into reopening the Strait of Hormuz, warning that Russian entities would otherwise face designations under Operation Economic Outcast. Russia declined and told Iran the threatened measures were of limited consequence, This is according to two senior Iranian sources with knowledge of the briefing. The message also warned that Russian banks, traders, and shipping entities tied to Iranian oil, gold, and aviation will be sanctioned under the operation unless Moscow moves to close those channels. So I wanted to get your take on this because I'm not even sure that this has been confirmed.
It hasn't been confirmed at all. It won't be confirmed because straight up, let's just parse this out. Okay, Radcliffe is a CIA director. He flew to Moscow. We now know that two things. He met with Narishkin, the Russian head of the Foreign Intelligence Service, because he's a CIA official meeting with a Russian intelligence official. It's part of established intelligence on intelligence connectivity. We also know that he did not meet with Vladimir Putin. He did not meet with Vladimir Putin. There's talk about he went in there and had a 15-minute conversation, and Putin dismissed him with a thing. But the official Russian line is he didn't meet with Vladimir Putin, nor would Vladimir Putin meet with him. There's no reason for him. And especially to deliver an ultimatum or a warning. Again, come on. No, put on your thinking caps. So now the head of the CIA has to fly to Russia for some intelligence on intelligence things that are so sensitive that it has to be done now, et cetera. Okay, so who knows? Maybe it's about Ukraine. Maybe the U.S. wants a way out and they're looking for a backdoor channel. The last thing it is an ultimatum. It's basically Radcliffe saying, hey, we need to fix this thing because it's getting out of control. And, we stepped on our you-know-what, and we need your help. That's more likely what happened. But now let's just say that it is what they said, that somehow Radcliffe came to deliver an ultimatum to Narishkin about economic. Come on, people, use your brains. That's not how it works. That's not what the CIA does. It would never happen. But that's the kind of message that would be issued by the State Department to the Russian ambassador. They got an embassy down in Washington, D.C., and it's got a very senior Russian diplomat there called an ambassador. And the ambassador would normally receive threats of this nature. The State Department would call him in and say, we're putting you on notice officially. Why send the CIA direct? People just don't put on their thinking caps. That's not how the real world works. But let's say it did work that way. So now you're telling me that the Russians, Narishkin, who is just notoriously tight-lipped, you don't see leaks coming out of the Russian SVR like you do out of the CIA. But now Narishkin went and talked to the even more reticent Iranian intelligence services because it's intelligence on intelligence. Narishkin doesn't go talk to the supreme leader. He talks to the Iranian intelligence service. And I think that's what the press thing is. And now this is an intelligence service that doesn't talk about anything. Hell, we don't even know they exist. And suddenly, two sources familiar with the top secret discussions between Narishkin and the head of the Iranian service are speaking to the press, leaking everything. Do you guys understand how stupid you have to be to believe this story? It just blows the mind. But this is the problem, because in America, all those people who are Islamophobes and Iranophobes, they're sort of frustrated that we got our butts kicked. They really don't like that. And so they want to believe that Scott Bessent's nonsense has a bite. Remember, I just told you that this thing's going to collapse. How can a CIA director go and threaten Russia about something that hasn't happened yet? We haven't sanctioned Iran at all under this. Therefore, there's no secondary sanctions on Russia announced, nor will there be, because as Bessent said, if we do this, the global economy collapses. So Scott Bessent straight up said, we're not going to do any of this kind of stuff. And now we got the CIA director flying in on a top secret mission to warn the Russians about something that will never happen. And then the Russians run to the Iranians and say, this thing that's never going to happen isn't going to happen. But don't worry, if it did happen, we wouldn't do it anyways because we got your six. Oh, but the whole world's going to collapse. No, this is the total 100% made up story.
Yeah, it's. Oh, speaking of Americans being upset about the damage, us getting our butts kicked, this just came through as well, that Iran inflicted billions in damage to U.S. intelligence sites. That's what's being reported right now. Now, one of the things that I talked about recently on the show, we've been hearing from those sailors aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, also the USS Boxer, talking about the conditions and things that were going on with that particular aircraft carrier. But it was also leaked that Pete Hegseth tried to keep this hidden, which is that part of the reason why they didn't have enough food and, hygiene items on the USS Abraham Lincoln is because Iran, one of the bases that Iran hit, supplied those items, and they were trying to keep that hidden. And now we see like things are being leaked slowly but surely, but now we see it's being reported that there has been tremendous damage that's been done to US intelligence sites in the Middle East. And that brings up this question as well, which is that how much are they hiding from us still about the damage that has been done? Because I just saw that report that they're going to send those US officials back to those US embassies in the Middle East, which kind of tells me the US is not going to try to strike Iran anytime soon if they feel it's safe to send them back over there. Um, but what does that tell us about how much damage has actually been inflicted on the US bases or infrastructure in the Middle East?
I can answer this question because it's been a long time since I was in the Middle East doing that kind of work. So I don't know anything about anything that's going on today. But past patterns repeat themselves. There used to be stories at the end of World War II that would talk about Vienna, Austria, is a den of spies because that's where the Soviets were occupying. Then we had American Berlin, battleground Berlin, spy versus spy. I mean, it was there, baby. The spies doing their spy thing. And you had great, interesting stories about how the United States tried to dig a tunnel underneath the wall to get in. And I mean, we were doing stuff. We spent a lot of money doing stuff because it was spy versus spy. The Middle East has, for the past 40 some odd years, been just a nest of spies. That's all it is. Everything is a spy versus spy. And there's some places, I mean, if you want to get the Iranian target, just put on your thinking cap. I mean, just think operationally for a second. How do you get into Iran? Well, one way to get into Iran, let's see, the Iranians send lots of dhows full of Iranian fishermen and commercial businessmen into, I don't know, Abu Dhabi, into Dubai, into the United Arab Emirates. They do business. If you walk around the souk down there, you'll see the Iranian merchants selling their goods. You'll see the dhows there at the slip. And, when these poor little Iranian sailors come off the boat, maybe they've got some ideas in their head about now that we're in the land of decadence and we're going to go out there and, the Ayatollah's not looking at me. I'm going to go hang out with the pretty Russian girls in the bar. And of course, we have CIA guys there. They don't look like CIA guys, but they're there making sure that the appropriate photographs can be taken. And then we compromise these guys, and then we start tasking them. We send them back with secure communications equipment. We send them back with other things, explosives. They come in and they start infiltrating into Iran, and that's how we do it, ladies and gentlemen. So the CIA has a whole big presence there. We also monitor their signals intelligence. Now, we don't do it, in your face sometimes. Maybe we'll want to get a hotel suite on the, Xth floor of some place that has enough height to give you, line of sight into the coastline of Iran, better signal propagation, and we'll start collecting the signals there and processing it. And then we'll build up a base because, it needs to be real time. You don't want to sit there and be bothered by collecting this data and shooting it back to Washington, D.C., so that the NSA can play games at Fort Meade, the CIA can play games at Langley, DIA can play games at Bolling Air Force Base. No, you create an intelligence fusion cell inside. But again, it's got to be covert. So you rent a villa. And it looks like it's in the normal town, where people live, but the villa's there, and they have guards that wear khaki uniforms that guard you coming in and out and all this stuff. And you build up this infrastructure over time. And the equipment that's used is very expensive, and this is the reality. The reality is in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Qatar, in Abu Dhabi, and in Saudi Arabia, the American intelligence community has created an empire where we have sunk in hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure designed to communicate. All these communications that take place, we're talking about high data streams that require satellite communications, which require dedicated ground stations that are able to generate that and receive it. And the encryption that's involved, the computers involved, all this stuff, very expensive. And gosh, I guess we thought that we were being really good at this. When I was in the United Nations, we used to go to a CIA safe house in Bahrain to be debriefed. And it was one of those villas I talked about. The CIA has them all over the place. Everybody knew it was there. The Iraqis knew it was there because right across the way, the Iraqis bought a house so that their antennas could point at this place and take photographs of us while we were being debriefed walking around. So we were told, be careful when you walk around. Leave the building and go this route to get in your cars and drive this route so you can't be photographed by the Iraqis. I'm like, well, what? You're telling me they know we're here? Yeah. Nothing the CIA does is secret in the Middle East. The other thing you learn about the Middle East is that every intelligence service is owned by the other intelligence service, that the Iranians have penetrated all of the foreign intelligence services that are working with the United States. So the Iranians knew everything. Nothing we did was secret. So when this war came about, remember we had that conversation about, the CIA and the BBC getting people spun up. So the Iranians went, you want to play games? Let's play games. And they destroyed everything. They targeted it. Take a look at half of the quote unquote civilian infrastructure that was hit in the United Arab Emirates. It's all CIA affiliated, all U.S. intelligence community affiliated.
Wow. That's wild. One more for you,
I
Scott.
have to say this, speculation on my part. I have no direct knowledge of this. And if I did have direct knowledge of it, I would never talk to you about it. So
One more
I can only talk about what happened in Bahrain because I was a United Nations official at the time. If I was a U.S. government employee at the time, mum's the word, would never talk about it. But because it was already known to an international community, I'm not compromising any sources and methodologies by talking about this. But this is how sensitive that kind of stuff is. But just understand that we wrap everything in a facade of secrecy. None of it's secret. The Iranians know more about the U.S. intelligence community than the American people know. Isn't that sort of interesting?
Yeah, definitely. And that brings me to this one, which is that we've been seeing a number of these reports from U.S. helicopters to fighter jets just failing during training exercises. We're not even just talking about the war. There's another one here, and this is a U.S. Army helicopter. It crashed with 4 people on board. It says the UH-60 Black Hawk military helicopter crashed in Colorado. The status at the time of the crew and the cause is unknown. I'll show you here. So you get the point. Again, crashed in Colorado. I know we've talked before about the U.S., like we have depleted a lot of our weapons. We don't have the weapon capability that we used to. When it comes to the helicopters and these fighter jets, why are these vehicles just crashing during training exercises? Is that normal?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's normal. But my father spent 26 years in the Air Force as an aircraft maintenance officer. And he maintained aircrafts in peace and in times of war in Vietnam. He spent a couple of tours in Vietnam, keeping the planes flying. And, you train as you fight. And this has been the reality of the Air Force, of the Marine Corps, of aviation. We're asked to do, I'm sorry, I'm putting on my former hat there, but the U.S. military is asked to do some pretty demanding missions. You don't have to support them. You can be against war, and I'm against war. You know that. But you have to respect the fact that some of the things that the U.S. military pulls off are just like wow kind of stuff. Like even Maverick and Top Gun 2 couldn't pull this kind of stuff off. And they only can do that because they train. And they have to train under realistic circumstances. Oftentimes with helicopters, this requires them to fly what's called nap of the earth, basically right above the ground, going over, because you got to go below the radar. You got to fly between the seams. You got to get in where they can't see. I heard one story that this helicopter was affiliated with Task Force 160, which is the U.S. Army Special Operations unit. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it was, that means that they were probably flying at night, nap of the earth, night vision goggles, doing a practice run. Maybe they were preparing for a real mission, which means they fly very realistically, and things happen. You get a hiccup. They try to maintain these airplanes properly, but if you're flying nap of the earth, that means you get one hydraulic hiccup, and you sink 5 meters. You're dead. You hit the ground. I've flown nap of the earth with these guys. It's simultaneously the most thrilling thing you've ever done in your life, and it's also the most scary thing you've ever done in your life, because you realize one mistake and it's all over. Here we see a mistake was made and it crashed. But this is what happens in these operations. And our aircraft have become more and more complicated. There's just more things that can go wrong. And so when you subject them to a high rate of high tempo of operations, things can go wrong. It's just the way the world is, Sabby. We ask so much of the men and women who put on the uniform, and they train really hard. Hopefully, they're training for missions that justify the expense of the training and the sacrifice we ask them to make. Clearly, with Iran, that wasn't the case. Clearly, with just about every war the Americans fought since modern times, that hasn't been the case. But that's not the fault of the men and women in uniform. They put that uniform on because they're prepared to give their lives in the service of their nation. I just wish their nation would come up with a mission worthy of that sacrifice, or maybe avoid missions like that altogether. Maybe say that the best way to spend 20 years in the U.S. military is training hard for a war you'll never fight. But sadly, training hard brings with it risks, and those risks oftentimes result in crashed aircraft.
If someone were to come to you today and ask you if you think they should join the military, what would you tell them?
The funny thing is, if you had asked me that question 6 months ago, I would have given you the answer that I would have given anybody my entire life, which is the United States Marine Corps is one of the best things that ever happened to me. It made me who I am. It taught me about integrity, duty, honor. It was hard. It was challenging. It allowed me to test myself. And I would say that it's worthwhile service, understanding that you may not get to serve with the political leader you want to serve with. I enlisted under Jimmy Carter, who I despised. I served under Ronald Reagan, who I cherished. I served under George Herbert Walker Bush, who I respected. I served under Bill Clinton, who I despised. You don't get to pick your president. You pick your nation. You say, I'm going to serve the nation. What's happening today, though, in the United States is that we have literally stopped behaving as a constitutional republic. And why is that important? Because when you join the military, you don't serve a president. You serve the Constitution. You take an oath to the Constitution of the United States to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Our nation has ceased to function as a constitutional republic. So therefore, any oath of service you take would be a lie. You're taking an oath to something that doesn't exist. Moreover, even then I could say, hold your nose and try to fix it. But we aren't America anymore. We have literally sold our nation out to a Zionist enterprise. So, we now have in Congress today a National Defense Authorization Act that will basically blend us together with the state of Israel, a genocidal state, a murderous state, a state that has nothing in common with the constitutional republic which I served. And this is the reality. America has become an extension of the greater Israeli, enterprise. As I mentioned earlier, we've always had this problem. APAC cards being handed me by NBC producers. It's always been there. But I always believe that you still could take an oath to the Constitution and responsibly execute that oath, because as imperfect as America was and is, the Constitution still mattered. Today, sadly, the Constitution doesn't seem to matter. The checks and balances that are supposed to defend this democracy don't exist. We have a cult of personality today in the president, a president who doesn't appreciate the Constitution, who operates in open defiance of the Constitution. We have a Congress that refuses to hold him accountable and a court that is incapable of holding them accountable because they're political appointees. So I would say this today. No, America is not worthy of your service. And until which time America becomes a nation worthy of the sacrifice they will ask you to make, no, the best way to serve your country is to serve the Constitution. The military no longer serves the Constitution because the Constitution doesn't matter to the commander in chief. You serve the Constitution by fixing things at home, by repairing this democracy, making this a nation worthy of service. And I would also advise everybody who's currently in the military that when your enlistment ends or your contract ends as an officer, to leave, because you no longer serve America, you serve Israel. And if you don't understand that, then you probably shouldn't have joined to begin with. So today it's as clear as it can be. America is not a nation worth dying for at this point in time. It's a nation worth fighting for, and I will fight for it here at home. But I'm fighting for the Constitution. I'm fighting to preserve that which defines who and what we are. But this is the duty and responsibility of the citizens of the United States. The military that's supposed to protect us, what are they protecting? We broke it. They're protecting something that's broken. I can't ask somebody to die for that. Stay at home, fix this country, repair this country, make the Constitution relevant, and then once the Constitution is relevant, taking an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution becomes noble service. But it doesn't exist today.
Scott Ritter, thank you so much for your time. Where can people go to follow your work?
ScottRitter.com. If you go there, it takes you to my Substack page and everything's there.
All right, Scott, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.